On an April morning, just after a lambing snow, two Church of Scotland ministers went on an adventure around the Scapa Circuit, a flight with Albert in his Cessna aircraft around the south half of the county of Orkney. We took off from Lambholm, flying first south down the line of the 4 Churchill barriers, built during the Second World War to protect the natural anchorage of Scapa Flow from enemy submarines. The barriers were built by prisoners who built something else that I'll mention at the end of this video. Living over the barriers is a bit different from living in any other part of Orkney. On Orkney mainland, you have the towns of Kirkwall and Stromness, everything you could want in terms of medical care, shopping, businesses. On the separated North and South Isles of Orkney, life is more tranquil, more slow. There are issues of accessibility and transport. But on the 2 islands of Burry and South Ronaldsay, which are attached to Orkney mainland by the Churchill Causeways, as they're otherwise known, you have the best of both. You have the ability to drive to Kirkwall most of the time, but just sometimes in the winter the barriers are closed by the weather, where it's just not safe to try to drive. And so from the church and manse of St Margaret's, it takes half an hour, or not at all, to get to Kirkwall. Scapa Flow, that enormous natural anchorage, is so vast that from one side to the other, oil rigs and the biggest tankers just seem to disappear into little dots. And from the settlement of St Margaret's Hope, it's an hour's sail over to the north coast of Caithness at Gills Bay. Scattered through Scapa Flow are tiny islands with wonderful Norse-sounding names like Cava and Fara. There's Flotta with this oil terminal, which will in coming years become a green hydrogen production facility. And then Long Hope, a hope in the Norse dialect being a long, thin bay, and this one particularly long and thin, until you turn the corner to the stunning west coast of Hoy. At the bottom of these cliffs, hundreds of tiny caves undermining them, and showing off the distinctive geology of Orkney, sloping down in its sedimentary rock from the high west coast all the way up Hoy, the mainland of Orkney and Westray, sloping down towards the much more douce, tranquil, less dramatic east side. As you fly up the west coast of Hoy, suddenly the drama gives way to the tranquility of Rackwick, a green, verdant, safe little haven. If you know Peter Maxwell Davies music, you might know the Lullaby for Lucy, set there upon the birth of a much awaited first child in generations. From Rackwick on foot, it's quite a walk, probably 3/4 of an hour, to get round to Orkney's most famous resident, the Old Man of Hoy. You can see the path very close to the cliff edge. By air we do that journey in moments, spotting the old man ahead just round that corner. He looks resolutely back towards Caithness, as if he doesn't much care what's happening in Orkney behind him. I've often suspected that when the last ferry has crossed from Stromness to Scrabster and there is no one to see him, he peeks a look over his shoulder up to the north to see what's going on in the island group where he is such a welcoming figure. It's stunning enough to see him from a ferry, but this close, his 450 feet are just something else. St John's Head at the north end of Hoy is the highest perpendicular sea cliff in Britain, but the cliffs continue when we've crossed Hoy Sound and start trundling up past the mainland of Orkney. North Gault and Castle, that rock stack, was the scene in 1984 of a very memorable Rover car advert, where a car was quite literally dropped on top of the stack and the advert had the strap line, "How do they do it?" Yesnaby is just amazingly photogenic scenery, iconic in postcards of Orkney. The castle of Yesnaby, like the old man of Hoy's tiny little brother. And then we turn first east and then south a little to come round to Stromness. The second settlement in terms of size, but don't tell Stromnesians that they're second to anyone. They have it all in this stunning little town. They have the Pier Arts Centre, an award-winning building containing some of the very best of British art. They have the traditions surrounding George Mackay Brown's work as poet and author, the presence of Peter Maxwell Davies off and on for parts of his life when he lived over in Hoy, the other main ferry link to Scrabster, and the kind of town where you can wander up and down that long snaking main street there, pausing for a coffee or just to look at rain-soaked flagstones and to soak in the atmosphere of somewhere that feels kind of a little magic. The little island of Grahamsay, standing sentinel with its lighthouses. And then to the east, between Stromness and Kirkwall, the surprisingly remote parish of Orfer, really not far from either settlement, but rougher, more hilly than the rest of the mainland of Orkney. More little caves, but everything on a smaller scale now. And flying over the north edge of the flow, which, looked at from any aspect in Orkney, is just utterly vast. The land becomes more fertile as we come closer to the town. And then crossing over Scapa Bay, passing Kirkwall, where the church and manse in the parish of Ham serve now the whole of the land mass on that side of the town, and a little further to the north. In St Andrews, the school that serves all three historic parishes. We've come back now to the north end of the barriers. You can see a truck making its way over barrier number 1. And after a quick flyover of the kirk that serves that part of mainland Orkney, we're ready to make our final approach back down to the grassy airstrip on Lambholm, and safely back to earth. I said the prisoners did one other thing apart from building those causeways, the barriers on the eastern side of the flow, they took 2 Nissen huts intended to be a schoolroom for them and turned them into an amazing Italianate chapel, trompe-l'oeil painting, carved concrete, bully beef tins and stair rods from block ships in the channels into the flow, helped by their guards, inspired by their faith. The monument they have left stands testimony to the power of faith, generosity and love over the horrors of war.